I was looking for women who not just are filmmakers or researchers or biologists, but a more diverse group of women who could answer this questionnaire for me. And trust me, I couldn't find more than 20. And I decided one evening, put this whole thing aside, let's just make directory a yellow pages of sorts of women, in the wild.
Hello and welcome to deKoder and our podcast, Women in Nature. Women have been in the center of the fight to protect our environment, from indigenous women who preserved traditional ecological knowledge to modern activists who have advocated for sustainability. But it's still a challenge for women environmentalists to be taken as seriously as their male counterparts. In addition to the indigenous women, women have also been scientists, they've been ecologists, they have been writers, photographers, filmmakers, and artists. And yet we don't see enough women in decision-making roles and in policy-making roles. Women who have bucked this trend, made lasting change, and who have been trailblazers and pathfinders have often been labeled difficult women, but they have been difficult for Earth's sake. World-famous primatologist Jane Goodall once said, "It doesn't take much to be considered a difficult woman, and that's why there are so many of us." In this podcast, you will see and you will hear their stories so that we can better understand the interconnectedness between environmental issues and gender, a connection that highlights a more inclusive approach to conservation and sustainability. Today, I have with me an amazing difficult woman, Akanksha Sood,
a woman leader who has been very difficult for Earth's sake. She's one of India's leading natural history and conservation filmmakers. She founded the Gaia people and champions other women in the field. She created the first all-women directory in wildlife. That is, women who work in wildlife, a lot in South Asia. There'd never been a common platform before Akanksha created it. She's won over 200 awards, including the National Award, several times. In 2023, she was also chosen as one of 75 women leaders in India by the United Nations Women's Group.
So I'm going to start by asking you what sparked your journey in nature. Like, what was it? Were you a child, a teenager? What was that one big thing that you went, this is it, this is what I'm going to do?
I was 6 years old, and there was a television, black and white television set that was brought into the house. And that changed my world completely. Completely. Back then, obviously, there was no nature programming, and it was Doordarshan. So I grew up on Doordarshan. I was a teenager when cable television came in, and I was completely hooked onto nature programming. And yet, 13, 14 years of age, I did never think of this being a way of having a career in it. I just didn't know. I just thought that this was something foreigners do. You get access to this kind of skills only if you live outside of India. And I was enamored. It was there somewhere. It got settled in the back of my head, but I never thought about it proactively. I wanted to do medicine, I left that. I wanted to do engineering, I left that. I was a science student who went on to do economics honors from Delhi University. I don't think so. I even have a graduation degree. I never went and collected it. And then I went on to do advertising and marketing from Xavier's. And then I met this man who was looking for an assistant for his wildlife film on the human leopard conflict. I was all of 21 years old. And because I used to talk a lot about wildlife and how I want to, do nature films when I started the workforce, when I joined the workforce. So someone told me about him, and that's how I met Praveen, who's now my husband. And that's how I kind of got into it. I think it was an opportunity that kind of knocked on my door, and I recognized it and I grabbed it.
Amazing. And Praveen was my 1 year my junior in Jamia. And his
Yes.
work is amazing. I loved his film on Lions of Gir, especially that wonderful bits that he had with the women forest guards and the woman researcher in the film. And, so very few films really explore those spaces with women in it. So that was something that stood out, and he's always been lovely. Did you have any kind of strong female example growing up who showed you that there was a way to blaze a trail in this and that women could step into this space?
No, none at all. None at all. I had heard of a few names. Yeah, there was Rita Banerjee I had heard of back then, and it was through Praveen that I met her, and she was also doing her bear film at that time, so she had struggles of her own. But she was someone who, in a few ways, kind of inspired me to do, to do what I am doing. But other than that, honestly, in the larger scheme of things, in the Indian context, I really never found a role model or anyone I could look up to. None. Before me, I think it was just Rita's name that I'd heard of. That's it.
Wow. Yeah. See, I think this is one of the biggest obstacles in women kind of like going into a space and occupying a space or seeing that they have an opportunity in that space is because either you're the first person doing it or you don't see the women who potentially have done it. It's just you never hear about them. They're never out there. It's always the men that we hear about. And this is something I think you kind of crystallized and realized and you created your Women of the Wild series. So maybe you want to talk us through why you did that and what that's kind of what it's achieved, like, what you set out to achieve with that.
Coming to Women of the Wild, so this started in the pandemic, the time that we all were in this global lockdown. I am a member of the Jackson Wild Advisory Board, and we were looking at how we can engage the community online and kind of skill build during this process. So the idea was to look at women who are working in STEAM in India and see if we can help them talk about the work that they're doing, use social media as a platform, and kind of storytell using social media. And I wanted to figure out if this would be something where we could target early career women, or should it be mid career? And I put made a questionnaire, and I wanted to. I was looking for women who not just are filmmakers or researchers or biologists, but a more diverse group of women who could answer this questionnaire for me. And trust me, I couldn't find more than 20. And these were the 20 I knew very well. And it was very frustrating. I've spent almost a month becoming a stalker on social media. You know, Names are misleading, profiles are blocked. I've chatted with men for a couple of hours only to realize that they're men because, again, names can be gender neutral. So it's a little difficult. It was very frustrating. At the end of the month, I'd forgotten why and what I was doing and why I'd set out to, what my goal was. And I decided one evening, put this whole thing aside, let's just make a directory, a yellow pages of sorts of women, in the wild. That's it. That was just one simple thing. There were 4 questions I wrote. I sent it out to the 20 women I knew. And I said, if you know more women, just give it to them and tell them to get back to me. And it started with 20, and today it's, I think, over, I don't know how many, 11,000, not just women, men including. It's become I would say it's a big platform which is yes, a directory of women working in STEAM with a nature connect. But more than that, I think what it has become is also a platform where women can very openly talk, feel safe, and talk about institutional practices, which I think for all these years, all these decades, have just been swept under the carpet. And that was, these are through the institutional reviews that we have been doing. And these are not reviews that I do, I just put out the name of an organization, and I invite people who have been associated with that organization in any capacity to review that organization. It's as simple as that. When I started off, it was all, positive reviews, or nobody would even comment initially. But one organization turned out to be the game changer. And after that, a lot of people went back to the earlier organizations also and very honestly reviewed. I also opened up anonymous review options with the condition that you have to reveal your identity to me, because eventually, it's the platform that's going to post your review. So I have to know who you are. I have to be able to verify that information. If you've been associated with the organization for a while, verify that, and then I will post your review on your behalf anonymously. It really
Yeah,
brought
that is.
so much that I think a lot of us had just probably only heard of, or it was whispered behind closed doors, but now it was all out there in the open.
And that's something that I think we don't talk about enough, because people don't understand that in this space of environment conservation and wildlife, as much as the work when you do it sounds all noble, and here you are, fighting for the rights of either indigenous communities, or you're working with those indigenous communities, or you're a scientist, or you're a field biologist, whatever it might be. I mean, the level of still harassment really that women face is quite extensive. It happens in the academic spaces, it happens in the field when they're in the field, it even happens in the professional spaces when they're trying to get projects off the ground, or are working on projects, where they're assistants or editors or what have you. And it's quite astounding how widespread these stories are. And I think you and I, we all know women who have been through this. So do you think, Akanksha, this is one of the things that also holds women back from really stepping forward and taking up space? Because no matter how strong or independent or supported we feel, it's still a terrible situation to find yourself in.
It absolutely is, Swati. When I started off, I had no, absolute zero experience of being out in the wild on my own. I'd never even till before that. I remember going to Ranthambore first, and sorry, I remember going to Darjeeling in search of the red panda, and there was a foreigner working over there who I had to track down. That was my research project. I had to go look for somebody, and it was terrible. I'd never been out in the wild on my own, all of 21 years old, and I had to fend for myself. And when I stepped there, I realized that this is a space completely dominated by men. You only find women as housekeeping staff. And
Yeah.
there you are, treated as a complete alien, a city girl who's landed up in this remote place, you know? And obviously, you have a different sense of style, you have a different way of talking, all of that. Nothing goes in your favor. No matter who you are, and how understanding you are, and how adaptable you are, and whatever, nothing goes in your favor. It's all against you. It's all against you. They don't take you
Yeah.
as who you are. You're just there to have some fun. And so I've gone
Yeah.
through a lot of terrible experiences, I would say, when I started off. And I think 22 years of doing what I did, when I started Women of the Wild, I realized things haven't changed much. I never worked in a lab or inside an office space, but it just kind of showed me that it's bad across the board, whether you're in your organization, inside an institution, in the lab, or out in the field. Things are just the same.
Yeah, I remember when I got the opportunity to do Born Wild, when I was with NDTV, and I'll never forget. It's such a silly thing when you think about it, but you've obviously experienced this as well. When you're out in the field and you're out the whole day, it's not like you're going back to the rest house or the guest house or wherever it is that you're staying. You're basically out in the field, and you're carrying your equipment, you're doing all of this, and then everyone around you, from the person who's driven the jeep to the forest guards to perhaps the ranger, the whoever it might be, it's all men.
something as simple as needing to pee in the middle of a shoot and figuring out where you're going to go do this and trying to find a space that's safe, where you can do this, and wondering if it's okay. And of course, being a woman, if you have your period, that's another whole. These are things that men do not even have to think about for half a second when they step out into the field. So I think this is something, again, we don't talk about too much. And it is something that women have to think about. Men do not have to think about. And the problem is when a woman is in charge of a project, she thinks about all of this. And so if you're working on a project with a woman, there's all the space in which you feel safe when you do all of this. But if you're like new, or you've joined as an assistant on a project that's headlined by a man, and there is no gender sensitivity kind of training that's gone into this project, it's actually a huge problem.
It is, and the health repercussions of it are immense. I know I've had kidney
Yeah,
issues early on because you're
yeah,
holding on to, all your biological processes, and either you want to find the right place or the right time, or you want to wait for someone to take you somewhere, which would be a good 1 kilometer walk, when you could just very well, everyone could just turn around and you could just be right behind them, But no,
yeah.
they really it becomes a project, and then it's time consuming, and so it's just a hassle having a woman on a shoot.
Exactly. Or you're
Or you can't.
complaining, or you're too
Oh, you're
sensitive.
complaining. Exactly. So
Yeah,
we become
yeah,
difficult women, just because we want to pee or check our pad.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's so fascinating. So maybe Akanksha, coming to this then, because you've done so many fantastic films, you've pretty much traveled the length and breadth of India. So maybe give us some of your, I guess, two, three of your best experiences in the wild. What would have they been?
There's so many, Swati. I don't even know where to start. I think everywhere I go, every species, even if I'm seeing it for the 15th time in the year, is fascinating for me. I think one of the most fascinating places that I've been to recently is Lakshadweep. We were there for a month in February this year. We were doing a film for On the Brink, the third season on corals. And we were stuck there for a month because of the flight service issue. But it was an amazing time we've had. I've been to Lakshadweep, I would say, after almost 18 years. There's a drastic change in the water. And one of the things I think we don't highlight enough is the ocean and the water. The ocean gets completely neglected, and what's happening in Lakshadweep right now, I think, is a story that really needs to come out into the larger global audience perspective. But it's an amazing place. It's just amazing. I think it's dying a very rapid death. But Lakshadweep was outstanding. Every year, I tend to go back to the 10 biogeographic zones in India. And over the last 22 years of doing this, in a way, I've been able to see the changes that are happening. It's all like a mental documentation that is happening. Another place that I really, really love is the northeast of India. I think this just so diverse. It's so dense. It's so beautiful. We have had some amazing encounters with, animals and indigenous communities over there. I love the food and the people and the culture of the Northeast. It's absolutely outstanding. And another place that I really have begun to love is the Deccan. We were there a couple of years back shooting wolves, and it's an outstanding landscape to be in, to experience it. I mean, all the national parks, the forests, the rivers, everything is great, but I think these lesser known habitats, there's a whole different charm to it.
So, one of the things in being able to do this, and I keep telling a lot of women this, is you get to see your country in a way that most people don't. You get to go to these extraordinary spaces. You get to see the absolute true splendor of India, which is not in its cities, which is not in the tallest statue that we build and the biggest bridge that we build and some whatever highway over the ocean, whatever it might be. This, when you see the waterfalls, when you see the mountains and you see the Ran of Kutch, You see it as a salt pan in one season, you see it covered in flamingos in another season, you walk into this phenomenal mangroves and in the Sundarbans, and you are up in you're in the Western Ghats, and then you're in a place that could be like really like just rocky and dry and drought like the Rayalaseema, but all that red rock and brown earth. And it's just this extraordinary landscape that India has. And I keep saying, women who are in this field, who are field biologists, who get to make films, who it's such a great field to be in, because you get to
Yeah, and
experience India in a way that most people don't.
yeah, and I think given the work we do, we are at the absolute grassroots, and that is a perspective you will never get.
Never.
You'll never get as a tourist. Even if you go as a
Yeah.
tourist, you will never get. So this is amazing, the kind of interactions and the kind of things we've seen, because in a way I would say we are at the grassroots, we are at the front line. It's a privilege, of course, but I think a lot more people, youngsters especially, young girls especially, we could pave the way for them to be able to do this kind of work. It's going to change the way we communicate about the natural world in this country.
Yeah, and it's so sorely needed, because we are seeing what's happening in India. We are seeing every summer it's getting hotter. We're seeing these ridiculous situations. There's now, I think the last 3 years, I don't think there's been a single monsoon without like a proper cloudburst or a life-threatening flood event where thousands of people have been affected, displaced, or have died.
I remember growing up, Orissa was the place where you'd hear of extreme droughts, and then suddenly in monsoons there's a flood. You'd hear, cyclone activity in the Bay of Bengal or the Arabian Sea. But now, in the last 8 years, every big city in India, whether it's summer, whether it's monsoon, whether it's winter, there is some natural calamity or the other happening. We want to
Yeah,
plan a
and look at
holiday.
Delhi with the air pollution.
Oh, let's not even talk about that. I was hospitalized. I had to get steroid injections yesterday because of this.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I mean, if we can flood these spaces with young women who are committed, inspired, who want to, because we desperately need these stories just to be able to step into this field as women. And the reason why I say as women is because I think I read something very interesting somewhere, where it basically said that when a woman is in charge of a project, or a woman goes into a space, or she studies something, she includes everybody in that space, men and women. When men generally go into a project and do the same thing, it's not that they're consciously doing it, sometimes it's conscious, but they don't always, it's not an inclusive space for women.
A lot of this also has to do with, obviously patriarchy is the problem, but it's also the conditioning that we have as men and women, men as and women. You spoke about, how when a woman is put in charge of a decision making project, what she does versus what a man does. That if you look back, it's also got to do with how we've been conditioned as a traditional, homemakers. We take care of the house, where we have to take care of such diverse needs, because traditionally we're talking about joint family setups. There's got to be, everything on the table. Children have to be, sent to school or taken care of. They're the in-laws, they're the cousins, they're this, they're that, and they're guests. So as a woman, we are conditioned to think beyond ourselves. But as men who have traditionally been the, the what is the word for this for them? They go out and work. Oh God, my brain's not working. They bring the money
Uh,
home. They
yeah,
work.
the
They not all.
breadwinners.
The breadwinner. Yes,
Yeah,
that's the one. Right. So
yeah,
so 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 I think a lot has to do with that. So when we are made in charge, we're not deviating from what we actually do. We're thinking about everybody. A man is also potentially not deviating from what he normally does. He's just thinking about going, finishing his job, and getting the money and putting it on the table. And then it comes to the women to,
yeah,
take care of. So that's what we've been doing. But so
yeah.
just with that logic, more women need to come into these roles, as you said, Swati. and not
Yeah.
just, out there as voices, but also in these seats as decision makers in politics. We need to
Yeah.
see a lot more women there.
Absolutely. Less than 15% of environment portfolios worldwide, not India,
Yeah.
environment portfolios, less than 15% worldwide, women are in charge. I mean, that is
Mm.
how, skewed this balance
The
is.
whole
And as
country.
you said, you're very right. This conditioning of thinking beyond yourself is actually a tremendous strength when it comes to making decisions for the world. So it's not a negative at all. So this brings
Yeah.
me to my next point, which I think you did mention a little bit, but we could talk about it a little bit more. I think often in our field, environment, wildlife, whatever it might be. I think a lot of the times it's our own selves that holds us back. So if it comes to the film field, I remember when I joined Jamia as a student, it was wonderful because I had a lot of women professors and they demystified tech, because it was women professors teaching me to use the camera and to edit and to do all the tech stuff.
I think to a large extent, yes, it is our own selves holding us back. And I think this was a lot more, it's still true, but to a lesser degree now. I think there's a whole generation coming out which is really open to experimenting and pushing themselves and, wanting to learn and be there and do it, to prove to themselves and to everybody around them that they can do it. And you know what? The one game changer, I think, has been the cell phone. So that really is also opening up a lot of avenues for women who want to, just go out and tell the kind of stories and narratives that they see around them. So I think that's really been the game changer. But yeah, I'm not from film school. I have had zero experience with like to learn the theory behind anything, right? So it's all on the job learning, and even till date, I stay away. I know how to operate the camera. I'm a great, cinematographer and an photographer. I know how to edit. I can do all of that. I choose not to. For me,
Yeah.
I think filmmaking is a teamwork. It's very important to get someone who is, for me, it's very important to get someone who's more skilled than me, who can do it faster, who will also bring in a diverse perspective to the table. I've always been very conscious that I have to have a team which is diverse in terms of gender and ethnicity. And that's always that, I have built, I've encouraged women technicians on my shoots, always cinematographers, sound recorders. That's one field I feel that, we could do with a lot more women. I just see the difference in the quality of sound women pick up, the variety of sound women pick up versus what men pick up. It's amazing. So yeah, I think skills like these in filmmaking are very important, and I love to have women, in my team who can just go beyond just being an assistant director or an editor. I love to see more skills. In today's time, not going to film school, I think, is just an excuse for anything. But there's just so much available online, good quality
Absolutely.
education online available, and it doesn't cost anything to to learn if you really want to do it.
So you're on the board of so many international organizations. I would say it's not just India. There's Jackson Wild, and you've been on the jury of the international Emmys, and you've done all of this, and you're in contact so much with people all around the world. Do you see, in a big way now, things changing?
It's still definitely
Yeah.
disproportionate, but over the last a decade now of judging, I see the numbers are going up. But I think there's a lot more as a community that we can do, to kind of make these kind of festivals more accessible to people. I think if the entry fees is going to be $500, a lot of people are going to think five times before applying it. A lot of production houses tend to send in their work, but independent filmmakers, and I know there are so many great independent filmmakers, women filmmakers who'd love to send their work in, but it becomes, it just is not affordable. I think so. It's not just about, the processes, the systems really need to be rethought and changed for the better. If we were to look at a more inclusive environment, where we see more diverse, perspectives coming out, then there has to be a system change and not just, we can keep talking about, oh, the numbers are going up, the numbers are going up, but then we got to do a lot more. We're in the 21st century. We have so much at our disposal
Exactly.
today. And yet, somehow when it comes to gender equality, it's just at such a snail pace. It frustrates me, honestly, Swati. It really frustrates me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I often think, when you have International Women's Day and International Women's Week and stuff, I feel like those days we have for endangered species, like, I don't know, World Pangolin Day or something, or World Tiger Day or whatever. I mean, I think the day that we stop having a day for women is when we know that we've kind of stepped into a space where it's taken for granted. Because even now, it doesn't matter what field or whatever it is, it's if they celebrate it, it's almost celebrated like, oh my God, like a woman, like that's the headline. It's not about, oh my God, this work is extraordinary. It's more like, oh my God, it's a woman, and that's the headline. Whereas with other things that are extraordinary, no one says, oh my God, it's a man. They just say, oh my God, the work, or this project or this discovery or whatever it is. I'm going to come into another point now, which is we've so far talked about paths women could take, or obstacles in the paths, or challenges, or how things need to change and why they need to change. The other thing about being a woman is also this constant scrutiny that you're under, not just for your behavior, but literally for your appearance. And, we know how it is in our world of definitely filmmaking and presenting and all of it. So much comes down to how you look. So that's one part of it. So the other part of it being also that level of scrutiny is even there in ridiculous spaces where you're not even in front of a camera. I know that you did this incredible, very brave thing where you kind of looked at body positivity and the scrutiny, and you were part of this film where you looked at that and you were very, very honest about what it meant to you. And seriously, that took a lot of courage, and I have great admiration that you did that. But could you maybe talk me a little bit through that? Like, what made you want to do that? And I know as a mom, and you have a daughter, I think it was an extraordinary step that you took, because it changes so much for young girls everywhere. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, Akanksha.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been in front of the camera. I'm a producer, director, writer. So I've got other people working and doing that job to be on camera. And I see that it is very difficult. They have to tick certain check boxes to be able to make it, to be the face of a series or a show, to be approved by the broadcaster. It's very important. I know for a fact that men do not have that kind of a checklist. Oh, he's an expert. Here's a young girl who could be an expert, but no, she doesn't look it. And that still is true. Having said that, when DW, I'd got a mail saying that, could you help us find a successful woman in India who is not very successful woman in India who is not comfortable in her own body. I replied by saying, you just sent an email to that woman.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, and they called me up and they were like, seriously, what are you saying? I said, well, this is the honest answer. I am not comfortable in my own body, in my own skin. I don't like it. I don't like myself. I don't. It's been 10 years being a mother, and 12 years being married, and I know the changes that have happened in me, and I know that I've not cared about myself, and I just hate the way I look. I just hate it. And they asked, would you be willing to talk about this? I said, yes, of course I'd be willing to talk about it. You know, I'm happy no one's ever come to me and asked me any questions. So I'm going to be very happy talking about this. And that's how that whole show happened. They had this girl from Bombay who was, in a way, my mentor. She was diagnosed with cancer when she was very young, and because she was, anorexic, this whole thing about wanting to look in a particular way, had stopped eating, that affected her health, which led to cancer. So she came on board as a mentor to kind of help me, um, just declutter my head, I guess, to be able to dress the way I want to, and uh, just look at myself in another light. And it was a very interesting, I would say it was a very interesting experiment, because I think it was the first time on camera where I had so openly, someone asked me questions, right? So I so openly answered them, and things that I think even my brain had kind of blocked came out. And it made me realize that I'm doing this actually for my daughter. you know I don't have a very healthy relationship with my in-laws, primarily because obviously it's who I am. They don't approve of it. They're very, very conservative, and I'm a stark opposite of that. It's been, what, 15 years of being married, and now, and we still don't have a great relationship. And a large part of what I had become after my children were born, and I ignored it, I think, to me, was just that, it wasn't my parents, it was my in-laws, and who was scrutinizing me, because I was a difficult daughter-in-law, because I never I just simply refused to wear a bindi,
Yeah.
or I don't wear earrings, or I don't have even one bangle on my hand. This is a rubber band. I was a difficult daughter-in-law. That's all it took, just to say no.
Yeah.
No. And so I was like, to hell with it. I'm not going to be
Yeah.
this. Uh, they have a huge problem that I do not color my hair, even now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That my hair is so white and their son's hair is black.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just a problem at so many levels. And I am not, I decided this long time back, and I think I've become more blatant about it, is that what I do not agree with, where there is going to be an ethical conflict, I'm going to go by what I want
Mm-hmm.
to do. Because end of the day, it is my son and my daughter, both, not just my daughter, for whom my husband and I have to set an example. Nobody else. It's
Absolutely.
that home environment.
Absolutely.
We need to set an example, for them, both of them, very importantly. So it was, I think, the one thing that came out of that film was I realized that I had put on a lot of weight, which made me go and do some tests, and I realized there were a lot of problems inside me. I had very high cholesterol, blood sugar, and it was
Yeah.
it was a result of just ignoring my health. It was not anything else. And so I made this conscious effort to change all of that. I didn't want to take medication. And, I decided to
Yeah.
go on a good nutritional diet, and, strength
Yeah.
train, which is very important for women at our age.
Yeah.
And
Super
yeah,
important.
after all these years, I started wearing sleeveless clothes.
That's amazing. See, but it's also the work that we do. It's quite physical. So I think to stay fit for that is really important, because I'm 53 now, and I definitely find myself struggling with things that I just so took for granted. If I had to go back to the Chambal Valley in summer and carry that camera up and down those ravines and try and film what were they, the birds, the river skimmers,
Yeah, skimmers.
the really rare, yeah, the skimmers. If I had to do that again now in summer with that level of humidity, I would just keel over and die. Like, that's it. That I would be toast. It's when it goes beyond that. Oh, you haven't colored your hair, you're gray. Oh, you have wrinkles around your eyes. Or, oh, why can't you wear makeup when you do something? Or why can't you do this or that? Meanwhile, here there's you this extraordinary person with over 200 awards and nominations. You've blazed a path for so many women. You've been a role model, a change maker. So then, you spoke about being a mom. So this is going to be my next kind of thing that I was going to come to is, you do all of this extraordinary work, and I know you have to travel a lot to do it. And you're out in the field a lot, and it requires, I mean, I know what it takes when you're making a film, even when you're at home, if that project's in your head, you know how it is. It's kind of like having a third child. If you have two children, that's your third baby. I'm going to ask you more about, or I'm going to say how important I think it is that you do that, because I think children need to see independent working moms.
I make my children travel with me. I make them bunk school for weeks and months at a stretch together, and I make them travel with me because it's the privilege of my job. It's my own company. I'm doing my work, I mean, I'm not in a Google where
Yeah.
they have like daycare for children. I have a daycare where my children can be with me 24 hours a day, and they get to travel, experience the world, see things that the textbook is never ever going to show them, or is only going to be able to make these very theoretical connections for them. And I think both of my children, they've been traveling from. My daughter started when she was 35 days old. My son started when he was about 50 days old. Started traveling with us. They are who they are today is because of that experience that they get every few months of being out in the wild with their parents. And I think uh, as they grow older, yes, those their preferences will change. It'll become competitive. We may not be able to take them out as much as we want them to and miss school, but I'm going to do it irrespective. I'm going to force them to come with me, travel with me, because I realized very early on that I'm not the kind who's going to be sitting at home and taking care of my children. My life cannot revolve around uh, you know what I expect or what I want to make them be. I cannot adjust my schedule to this. I'm not the person who can be home all the time. I need to be out doing what I really love doing, because if I'm not happy, none of that is going to get translated into anything. They're not going to be happy kids to see a very unhappy mother around them taking care of them. And thus it became very clear that they have to travel with me. I'm not making them
Yeah.
sit in a closed environment, or making them sleep in the afternoons in a daycare or any such thing. They're out there in the wild. My son can swim, snorkel and dive. So can my daughter. They travel everywhere we go, and it's just outstanding the way they've shaped both of them, all because their mother didn't
No,
want to be
nature is, I
stay
think
home.
that's amazing. So I think that's extraordinary what you're doing, and that it's its own kind of parenting, which also brings me to the point that, and I'm not saying this as an, oh, how nice to have a supportive partner. That's nonsense, because if somebody is your partner, then it just should be taken for granted that they're supported. They support you, male or female. It shouldn't matter. But it does make a difference in our field when our partner is also somebody who's equally passionate about that field. Because if you are, not that if you're a banker or a lawyer or whatever, that you won't love and support a partner who is in environment and wildlife, but I think to really understand what it takes and why it because it's a way of life. It's not just a job. It's not a job that you
Yes,
can go out and do and leave outside your door. This is something you carry in your heart, in your mind, in your body, in your passion. It is who you are. So I think
yes.
to then have a partner, that makes a big difference as well.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
nuances of this art that we do, right? I think Praveen understands them so well. And so, whether I have to be out for days or weeks at a stretch, how we live and how we eat, how we have to travel, all of that, he gets it. He has never questioned me, or I have never questioned him, because we just get it. We understand. We know what it takes to make a film. We know what it takes to be out in the wild and do what we do. And I think that is so important. uh, he's the reason why I'm being able to do what I do, because there are times when it comes down to, oh, the kids cannot travel, so one of us has to stay home. He'll always be the one who'll stay back home. He says, you go do what you want to
Yeah.
do. I'm happy being
Amazing.
home.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
just takes, he's been such a hands-on father, and I think that just takes, I think we all go through a little bit of guilt, a little bit of, anxiety, or I'm not home, the husband's taking care of the children. I've never felt that. I have never felt that, because from the time the children have been born, I've seen him being so hands-on with them. So I've realized that they don't need me when I'm not there.
That's so important to talk about, because it is not something special when a man does it. They are his children, you know? We
His
make it
children
out like
are
as if, oh my
him.
God, you
They're
have this
him.
fantastic partner who stays home with your children. I mean, from a partner to a partner perspective, of course, you must have grace and gratitude for that, because to have a supportive partner is an incredible gift. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this perception of constantly being like, oh my God, your husband's so hands on about this, or oh my God, your husband is so domestic in the kitchen, or whatever it is. It's his children, it's his house, it's his home. This is the other
Absolutely.
thing that should be as taken for granted as it is with women, where women are just expected to do these things. Men should be expected to do these things as well. So, just to conclude, Akanksha, what are some of your sort of I don't know, something that would be your words or some key messages for young women who should be difficult and find their own paths and trails to follow?
Like Jane Goodall said, it doesn't take much to be called a difficult woman. But if you really, really want to be labeled a difficult woman, uncondition yourself and just learn to say no. I think that's very important. We just don't know where to draw the line. So start saying no when you're uncomfortable, when you don't want it, when you know, uh, are just not in the mood, when you have nothing to say, just say no. It's very important. We say thank you, we should express gratitude and love and all of that, but we just don't say no enough. I think that's very important.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for joining me. It was so great to talk to you. And again, congratulations on the national award. Congratulations on the new season of On the Brink. And to everybody out there, seriously, Akanksha, what's a good way? Where's a quick way for people to see your work if they should? The
There's
best
a
way
lot
that's
on
accessible.
YouTube. There's a lot on YouTube, but On the Brink season three can be, sorry, On the Brink, the first two seasons, one and two, can be seen on the Habitats Trust website.
Okay, fantastic. Habitat Trust's website, people, really catch her work. It is amazing, and you'll see India and our wildlife in a way that you really haven't before, and told by an Indian and an Indian woman, speaking to people in those areas who knew those, I mean, who know those spaces. So it's all of it together. So it's amazing. Thank you, Akanksha. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Continue
Swati.
being a difficult woman. So.
I will. Thank you.
Joining me next week on the podcast is Aarti Kumar Rao, a slow journalism pioneer in India.
And I still remember, I think the turning point came when I read this 3-part series. It was Mike Fay's Mega Transect across the Congo. I really loved his photography at the time. And I remember thinking then that that's what I want to do.